Shabbat Shalom
Shabbat Shalom.
and Shana Tova. I have to say, I am always so happy in Shabbat Shuvah when I see people in the room. This is like such love and dedication. I couldn't even get my husband to come tonight, but he promised me that next Shabbat he would be here. So next Shabbat is Yom Kippur, people. Okay, just making sure you know that. So tonight, because it is Shabbat Shuvah, we have a special treat. We have Lou Ann Higgs joining us today. Always a pleasure when you're part of the team. And so we're going to sing some melodies today that may be new. Try to sing with us, or just sit back and open your hearts and allow the music and the words to flow over you. We begin on page 134.
Zamru l'Adonai b'chinor, b'chinor, v'kol zimra. 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 Zamru l'Adonai b'chinor, b'chinor, v'kol zimra.
Before we can formally welcome in the Sabbath, we need to formally welcome each other. So let's take a little time to stand up, move around, and introduce ourselves to at least two people we didn't know when we walked in tonight. So let's come back together. The Sabbath Queen is knocking at the outer door, waiting for her theme music. We'll continue with Lecha Dodi on page 138, and we'll be singing verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. Don't sit down. I want to invite everybody to welcome in the new year on this first Shabbat of the new year and to join us on the Bima if you feel comfortable to come and join us in the blessing of the Shabbat candles.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharei. וקדישנו במצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר של שבת. ברכוני לשלום, מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון. מי מלך מלאכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. צאתם לשלום, מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון. מי מלך מלאכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
So I want to thank all of you for coming up, because one of the things that I miss when I lead services is the surround sound of sitting in the pews and hearing everybody's voices. So thank you so much for the beautiful gift, and you guys sounded amazing. Now go sit down. Actually, don't sit down, because as the cantor just reminded, go to your seats, but don't sit, because as the cantor reminded me, we are continuing with the Baruch Hu on page 146.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
And excuse my sitting, but after all the standing I did yesterday, I need to sit a little bit today. We continue together on the top of page 149. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim.
אהבת עולם, בית ישראל, עמך אהבת. תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכבנו ובקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נהגה יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
We continue together in the middle of page 157. In a world torn by violence and pain, a world far from wholeness and peace, give us the courage to say, Adonai, there is one God in heaven and earth. The high heavens declare your glory. May earth reveal your justice and love. From bondage in Egypt we were delivered. At Sinai we bound ourselves to your way. Inspired by prophets and instructed by sages, time and again we overcame oppressive forces. Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our glory to bear witness to our God, keeping alive in dark ages your vision of a world redeemed. Let us continue to work for the day when the nations will be one and at peace. Then shall we rejoice as Israel did, singing on the shores of the sea.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורות אלות עושה פלא, מלכותך ובניך, בוקע ים לפני משה ומרים, זה לי ענו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר, כי פדה אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני. גאל ישראל.
We continue together on page 160. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים, לחיים. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים.
Shkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim
We continue together on page 162.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, ברית עולם, ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש.
Before we rise for the tefillah beginning on page 164, I just want to point out that the tefillah, the prayer, this main prayer in our service, is a little bit different between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That you'll see, for instance, if you turn to page 166, right in the middle of the Hebrew, you'll see some English that says Shabbat Shuvah. And if you've wondered what is Shabbat Shuvah, this is it. Shabbat Shuvah is the Shabbat of return. It's this Shabbat in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. This whole week, our prayers change slightly in the way that we address God, because this week we're asking God to remember us for life. So it's kind of like, I assume we've all been children here. Everyone's been a child, right? So remember when you were a kid and you wanted something from your parents, you might say, "Oh, mother dear," as opposed to "Mom." So rather than going "God," we're like, "Oh, God," is kind of the difference between how we're praying, that we're addressing God in the high holiday terms of Avinu Malkeinu, as God as the ruler, as our parent, and as our judge. And so there are some inserts on page 166 and 168.
Please rise.
Please rise.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sora, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah. Ha'el hagadol, hagibor v'hanora, El Elyon, gomel chasadim tovim, v'konei hakol, v'zocher chasdei avot v'imahot, u'mevii geula livnei v'neihem, למען שמו באהבה, זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וכותבנו למענך אלוהים חיים. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל, אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך אב הרחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ברחמים, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל, ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני המלך הקדוש.
We continue praying privately from page 172 through 180, standing or sitting as is your custom.
May the one who makes peace in the heavens descend on us, and the world will say Amen. May the one who makes peace in the heavens descend on us, and the world will say descend on us, and the world will say Amen. May the one who makes peace in the heavens descend on us, and the world will say Amen. שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל. אמן, אמן. ועל כל יושבי תבל עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. אמן, אמן. ועל כל יושבי תבל, may the one who makes peace in the heavens descend on us, and the world will say, Amen.
We now turn our hearts towards those in our lives and those in our world who are in need of healing, healing of body and healing of spirit. We continue on page 371.
מי שברך אבותינו מקור הברכה לאמותינו, may the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. מי שברך אמותינו מקור הברכה לאבותינו, bless those in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Well, it appears that a good way to get people here on Shabbat Shuvah is to say that you get to critique my sermons. So before we get to that, let me say I was very stressed out about the sermon that I gave yesterday. I don't know if you know this, Israel's a very controversial topic in the Jewish community. Really no laughs this week? Nothing.
Just the
I got
Jewish
nothing.
community?
Yeah, and the larger one too, but these are the people I work for. And I was nervous. I was nervous about what would my friends and family in Israel say, what would my Alfie relatives, who are a lot more conservative than I am, what would they say? And I was nervous because for most of us, Israel is a very personal topic, and we each come at it with our own history, with our own understandings, and it wasn't just any sermon, it was the high holidays, where I know this is going to sound strange, but I don't give political sermons. I give Jewish sermons, which it just happens that the world we live in, Judaism, are the things that we talk about, and Judaism happens to be a part of the world that we live in. And so the original sermon was probably another 6 minutes on what you heard yesterday. So having to cut it down to try to take politics out of it and to talk about it simply from a Jewish perspective, which is why you heard critiques of 2 of the members of the government and not of Bibi, because my critiques of Bibi come from a political perspective. We're very different politically. But my critique of Ben Gvir and Smolrich are very much coming from a Jewish perspective. They are presenting themselves as authorities on Judaism and presenting a form of Judaism that I find to be a perversion of our faith. And so I felt that it was important to talk about that rather than get into the details of politics, because otherwise it could have been a 2-hour discussion and it would have gone on, and nobody wants that, not even me. So, who wants to start? Okay.
I just wanted to say that actually I was relieved to hear you say that yesterday.
To say what?
To say everything that you said yesterday. It was a relief to me, because I have been so conflicted both in the secular world and even in this community to say anything, because I'm so confused about what's been going on and how to handle it and how to talk to people about it. So thank you.
Wait, did I see a hand up over here? Oh, snaps, Jen.
As I said to you earlier this evening, that may have been the best sermon you ever gave, as far as I'm concerned. I thought it was absolutely wonderful. On the Israel substance, I thought it was great. One of the things, though, as a side note to it that I really appreciated was your linkage of land acknowledgments to us as Jewish people. I have listened to land acknowledgments for the last few years at theater and everything else, and I think they're good, but I've always thought of them as kind of pro forma, and acknowledging land is great, but what are you doing about the underlying issues? And it was really helpful for me to hear this connection, and I know I'm going to think about them differently when I hear them from now on.
I was very appreciative, first of all, of your integrity and courage. And I felt, I didn't know for sure if I was right, that I was sensing how difficult it was to do that. And I think for a very long time I've wanted to hear that. And I feel that recently, here and there, you started to touch a little bit here and there on these things. But it was really full out with all that I had wished for. And again, I'm just so grateful. I hope there will be more of it. Thank you.
So the longer version actually was more full out, but part of it for me was also the timing, because it's hard with October 7th being around the corner. So in my earlier, and I also had to re-edit everything, because on Tuesday, with the bombings from Iran. So my original version was much more intense, and then I thought, yes, they're still cleaning up the shrapnel, that I had to make it less political. Did I see it?
I really appreciated bringing Hillel in, and I think particularly when so many Jews are circling the wagons and feeling so defensive, and just that reminder of, if we are only for ourselves, what are we? I thought that was very powerful.
Well, and I think that's one of the harder things about arguing about Israel outside of Israel. In Israel, there are very healthy debates. Jen, how many political parties are in the government right now? Do you remember? Is that it? Okay, that feels so little. Okay. So for those of you who aren't hearing, there's always a ton of political parties that run. Maybe 10 might make it into the government, because there's there's a threshold of how many votes you have to get in order to get a seat. The threshold used to be much lower, and believe it or not, that actually made it worse because it meant like one party that might have 1 or 2 seats might have massively disproportionate power in government, which is part of what we're seeing right now. Do you remember how many seats Ben Gavir's and Small Rich's parties have? It's not a lot, and yet you could have these small parties. Really, it's the tail wagging the dog, forcing Israel into this extremism because Bibi wants to keep his power, and he was definitely not going to get any support from non-extremists, because I don't know if you remember, but 2 years ago there was a political coalition that I like to call anybody but Bibi, and that was really the one policy that all of these different political parties on the left and the right agreed on, was that Bibi was toxic and had to go. And so you have these small extremist groups in Israel that is pushing the whole country into these really horrific policies, and there's a lot of controversy within Israel, particularly with Ben Gvir, who is horribly racist and terrifying, and tries to use the police force against the Israeli population as well. And if you look at what he's doing against the Israelis, you can only imagine how much worse it is in Palestinian communities in terms of what he's doing. Very reminiscent of Southern cops during the civil rights era. It's very troubling.
So I don't want to just repeat what others have said, all of which I am into, but also that I think for me, as someone, I've been in this congregation for like 34 years, which is ridiculous because I grew up my whole life not, being in a family that was relentlessly secular. And I've seen different phases of our history as a congregation, and there was a phase before your leadership where that could not have happened, and in fact where there was a lot of reactivity, groups who didn't want to hear these different perspectives were able to make that not happen. And so, and that was never okay with me, and I didn't come from a place earlier in my life where it was ever not okay to say, what you thought. And I feel like for me, in addition to the content, which was really important, that I was seeing a real seasoning and evolution of your leadership. That you've, I appreciate your saying you may have been quaking in your boots, and yet you had the certainty of who you are in this congregation and what's important to carry through, and that we are also more seasoned as a congregation. So that is also very moving to me.
So, thank you. So 2 things on that. First of all, that censorship ironically did not come from within the congregation. It came from the larger Jewish community, because I think the incident you're talking about is when we weren't even co-sponsoring an event. We just simply we were opening up our doors to let another Jewish group do an event here, which was, who are the soldiers that won't serve in the territories? Do you remember the name of that group, Jen? Can't remember the name of the group, but so they were going to come and speak. We weren't even sponsoring it. We were just letting them come and do the event here. And there was outrage coming from other places in the community saying that they would be picketing outside of our synagogue if we did that. And that kind of pushed things back a lot. But you're right, that was before I was the senior rabbi. The other thing that really helps is when you get to an age when you go, I'm okay with retiring. It gives you a lot more courage to say what you feel like saying, because it's like, what are they going to do? Fire me? That's cool. I have lots of things I want to do. I'm not quitting. Okay, sorry. Sure, her blood pressure started shooting. But it really does help when you feel like, it's kind of like when a politician doesn't have another race to run. You kind of get to say and do a little bit more what you want to say and do. Yeah.
I appreciate the accuracy of your, reminding us that that particular thing and other situations did come from the outside. But I think beyond that, there's a different climate within the congregation about having these, whether it's events or conversations. And I appreciate that you're part of that evolution. I really do.
I think so.
Yeah, I was struck by your comment that we as Jews can disagree with each other, and there are a few things that we will all agree upon, but we need to respect each other, and we need each other to form a healthy community. We can't splinter off and be angry and upset and disassociate ourselves. We have an obligation to each other to reach out and be supportive, even though we don't agree on many things.
That's true. That's really true. Yeah, there's not enough of us to really afford to be able to splinter off too much. There's an interesting clothing line that keeps popping up in my Facebook feed, and it's .02. And anyone want to guess what .02 is? World Jewish population. And so the .02, like their whole clothing brand is around that, about like being proud of being .02. Yeah, disproportionate power. Did you hear today that the government controls the weather? I really wanted to find out if the Jewish space lasers were helping control the weather. Yeah, and I was also really upset that if we do control the weather, why are we doing it with hurricanes instead of sending good weather everywhere so we don't have to do farm subsidies if the weather is good? It seemed very impractical to me. Oh, that was your week? You did a great job. Great job. Thanks. How about any other comments? Yeah.
I just agree with everyone. It was a remarkable threading of the needle, and it really hit a chord with a lot of us. And on the land acknowledgement thing, it's been a part of my life for a number of years because of the field I'm in. But I've had conversations about Jews as an indigenous people in Israel and been refuted about that. But I guess I just feel there's a narrow bridge we're all on, of those who agree with you, and obviously the left, parts of the left are very disconcerting, parts of the right are to me even more disconcerting. But I just want to explore a little more your thinking between what's Jewish and what's political, because when I run into conversations where people are basically saying, if you're not totally supporting what the government's doing and what Israel's doing, you're anti-Israel, and it's very adamant, and you're not really Jewish, you're not a committed Jew, and so forth. I don't know if that's political or Jewish, because I think of a key cornerstone of being Jewish is questioning, searching, always thinking about different ways of doing things and trying to improve yourself. And it's that questioning that it immediately runs into a wall with certain people. So how does that work in your construct of Jewish versus political?
That's a good question. So for me, part of the difference between Jewish and political is what's my justification? Am I coming at this from my faith belief? Or so, for instance, the existence of the state of Israel. I'm coming at that from my feeling, from my faith belief. It's very hard for me to look at our prayer books, look at Jewish theology, look at Jewish history, and say that a Jewish commonwealth is out. It's totally justified in everything in terms of our Jewish teachings, ritual, everything. What type of government is in power is a political thing. That for me is a different thing. That's different nuance. As far as those people who say, those people who claim that if you don't support the government of Israel, you're self-hating Jew. Very conveniently, those only tend to be people on the right, and only when their government is in power, and yet they have absolutely no problem. They had no problem ripping down Yitzhak Rabin or any prime minister that was on the left, and it has. I was going to say it has no basis in Judaism, but that's not exactly true. So we talk a lot about Hillel because Hillel really is the dominant. Out of all the early rabbis, he was probably the most influential in setting the tone for what we practice, which is rabbinic Judaism. But he had a nemesis, and the nemesis was Shammai. And luckily for us, Shammai's theology and his approach at life or his Jewish approach did not dominate and did not take effect. But he would have been the one. I'm sure Shammai told Hillel at some point, "You're a really bad Jew." I would be shocked if he didn't. I mean, it was that same sort of left-right kind of dialectic. Hillel was all peace, love, and happiness, and Shammai, if he didn't like something somebody said, like the story right outside on our wall. In that story, Shammai hit somebody with like a building tool, like a stick, like a measuring stick kind of thing. Not a pleasant guy. I could definitely draw comparisons with him and politicians in the United States and Israel. So, but that's a political thing. When you're trying to dominate somebody to the point where you say you don't have a right to talk, that's politics. That has no basis in Judaism. None at all. Oh, that sparked some interest.
Rabbi, there was a lot that I really, really deeply appreciated. I read it. I didn't hear it in person. So thank you for posting it and being brave enough to post it, because I know that's different than saying it live. I really appreciate your recognition that it's not the spiritual homeland of only the Jews, because I think in a lot of congregations, even that is a really challenging thing for people to hear. I have been thinking about this is a paraphrase, so I apologize if I get a little bit wrong, but the idea that you can love a country and hate its government. And I've heard you say that kind of over and over, like in this actually, even predating October 7th, with Netanyahu. Right. But I think there's probably a lot of people in our congregation that feel that way. I feel like that is a nuance that is not understood outside of the Jewish community. I have zero non-Jewish friends or people I know who can grasp this idea that Jews might love the land of Israel, the polity, the idea of a continual Jewish state, but hate this government. And I'm afraid that in this conflict, because that's not understood, and I don't think we've been very good at expressing it, because how we are perceived publicly, and this is because of everything the institutions put out, is that we stand with Israel. I mean, our federation says that all the time. It's in the bottom of every newsletter. The URJ says it. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. So nobody hears we condemn what is happening in the West Bank. Nobody hears those things. And so I've been wrestling with what you wrote and this idea that we can love a country and hate its government, and how do we actually do that in a way, because I'm concerned that this government, unchecked, and it's been unchecked because we haven't stopped them at the UN, we haven't stopped them with an arms embargo, we haven't stopped them with political pressure. This government, I'm afraid, unchecked, is going to take us into a realm where Israel becomes, where there's no turning back, where the rest of the world community sees Judaism as synonymous with violence. And that to me is so incredibly heartbreaking. And so how do we better express this idea that, I kind of think, and this is a little controversial to say, but I'm going to be brave like you. I think a lot about after 9/11, when a lot of Muslims felt like they had to denounce it, and they had to sort of say, this is not Islam. And when I see what happens in the West Bank, and what small church in Ben Gvir do, I feel like I need to say this is not Judaism. And then there's stuff that Netanyahu does that I feel like we need to say this is not Judaism. And how do we say that? And I don't think that Jewish institutions have led us on a course to do that in a way that we can say we support Israel, we want an Israel, but we don't support this government. For me personally, the way to do that is to support an offensive weapons embargo. And I know that's not a position that other people necessarily feel like they can take, but I don't see many alternatives, because how do we draw that line and not just pray, but how do we act? Like you said, we have to do 3 things at the end of the sermon. How do we actually do that action? So that's what I'm sitting with.
So Jennifer, I should say we're an unusual congregation because the immediate past president of the URJ is right there. So I'll let you, because I know exactly what you're going to say. So hold on one second. I don't know. I mean, that's my biggest problem is I don't know. I think the single greatest threat to Israel's survival right now is Bibi Netanyahu. And unless there are people in his coalition that are unless they're willing to stand up to him, I don't know what we could do. It's very similar to what we've seen in the Republican Party here, that just as Republicans have been kicked out of their own party and have been marginalized if they dare to have a different opinion, we saw the same with Likud, that he would systematically freeze people out. When I talk to my friends and family in Israel, they are terrified that he's taking them down a road of no return. They're not unusual in their belief in the least. The fact that there have been weekly protests in Israel during a war is like that's not how Israel has ever operated before, so that tells you the degree of anger. He's acted not just in a way that's an anathema to Judaism, but really core Israeli values, the idea you don't leave anyone behind. He and his party have spoken to the families of hostages in such a way, like, I don't even have a word, like shocking is not enough, that you could like say to a person's face whose child is a hostage that, you're being selfish. It's like, wow. So, okay, I'm going to say what Jennifer was going to say, and you'll tell me if I'm wrong. The URJ, the Reform Movement, and the CCAR, which is the Reform Rabbis branch, we actually put out press statements all the time denouncing all sorts of things about this government and the things they've done, particularly the last couple of years. What's been going on in the West Bank prior to October 7th has been horrific. I mean, just horrific. So Jennifer, is that what you want to talk to? Because I'm assuming...
We actually put out a really good, I have to say myself, a really good statement in about February or March of this year that is sort of a statement of what we stand for, that is supportive of there being a state of Israel and incredibly critical of both the government, what's going on, the settler violence, the expansion of occupation, all of that stuff. And it might be helpful because I still refer back to that when I talk to people, and it might be helpful if we could somehow circulate that to the congregation because it has really good points, I think, for you to use. One of the other things that I have found really helpful that you talked about yesterday too, Rabbi, when I talk to friends of mine outside the Jewish community where they assume that because I am supportive of the existence of a state of Israel, therefore I must buy into everything that the Israeli government does. I remind them of what it was like here in 2016 and 2017 and for the 4 years thereafter, where the number of policies and government things that were going on that I was so appalled by and so upset by and so wanted to do whatever I could do, whether we were talking about immigration or racial justice issues or anything else. And I had no qualms about taking those stances and still saying I love my country. And that's exactly how I feel about Israel, that I love it as a country and I can't stand some of the things the government is doing now. And that parallel can be really helpful sometimes in talking to people. The whole notion that you can't criticize the Israeli government, that is somehow a non-Jewish thing to be doing is just an anathema. That just is not the case.
Something else that you spoke about in services was an often heard statement that Jews are responsible one for the other. And I have to say, on a personal level, I've struggled with that, particularly when I think about the behavior of settlers on the West Bank. So to me, it's sort of a kumbaya kind of a comment, but I struggle with it. It's very difficult.
Okay, so I wasn't as effective in what I said then because I wanted to also show the play on what that means. That even if we don't behave as though we're responsible one for the other, we need to be aware that the world will always hold us to be responsible one for the other. So we do need to, when somebody is doing something, it's not just when Jews are in danger that we need to be responsible for them, but when a government is doing something in our name, we need to be responsible for that. We need to behave in a way that shows where we actually stand on that. I mean, I'm assuming your parents did what my grandparents used to do. Like, whenever, like, There was somebody like Michael Milken, like a Jewish criminal on TV. There was like this, like we're all, no, I mean, it was a very visceral thing. This horror that we will all be held accountable for his misbehavior. And that's true. Every Jew is responsible for one another, is both how do we behave, how do we see our own responsibility towards each other, and how are we seen by the outside world. And it's a double-edged sword. Okay, last comment. Who wants the last? Good. For a second, I thought that was my brother's arm, and I got nervous. Okay, but because you were right behind him.
I think Bernie Madoff is a better example.
They're both horrible.
Bernie Madoff directed his at the Jews.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I have a 24-year-old son who's grown up in Jewish life and been part of Jewish institutions and Jewish camping and the rest of it. But on October 7th, I felt that happened to me. There was no intellectual aspect.
Here, point the mic like this towards your, yeah.
Okay. On October 7th, I felt like it happened to me. It was an emotional effect that hasn't gone away. It's there this morning. It will be there tomorrow morning.
October 7th was different. As I said in my sermon, it was different than the first and second Intifada. It was different than suicide bombings. This was not about a Palestinian state. It was about Jews existing on the land of Israel. And part of the way that we also know that's different is look at the people who were taken hostage. They weren't just Jews. It was anybody. I mean, was it a month ago that there was a Bedouin Muslim who was returned home, who was able to come home, and he was taken hostage because he refused to take the terrorists to other Jews. He thought that maybe they'd be a little easier on him if he spoke Arabic to them, and they viewed him as a traitor because of that. It wasn't about politics. And a vast majority of the people who were killed on October 7th were from the peacenik camp. These were people who were advocates for coexistence, who actively worked towards peace and coexistence. It was different because it was different. And the way that the world responded before Israel even went into Gaza, and we could get into we don't have time, but we could get into all the politics of what happened once Israel went into Gaza. But on that day, I was seeing messages from people saying either A, it didn't happen at all, that this is all fake news, or B, everything was completely justified. And that was before Israel did anything. That to me was part of the difference. Jay, I have to give you the final because you're the president.
Thanks. So you know how I feel about the other day, and I appreciate what you've done. I think it's so important that we have this type of discussion within our community because we need to take it outside of our community as well. What I'm thinking about is how do we continue this discussion and how do we actually do something, in the words of Michelle Obama, which we need to do. I was telling Jennifer, we heard on our way over here that the state superintendent of Oklahoma City's schools has ordered 55,000 King James Bibles so every classroom can have one in the state, everything. So I just hope that we can, as a community and as a congregation, think about what we can do, because if we're not strong here, we can't be strong for Israel. So we need to do both of those concurrently.
Well, thank you for that easy task. I'll be right on it right after Yom Kippur. In truth, I hope this isn't the last conversation we have on this. I do think it's really important. I think that as a community, we tend to be very afraid. We don't want to hurt each other. We don't want to be hurt. But it's important that we talk about it. It's important that we ask hard questions. It's important that we share our pain, because this is a painful topic. And if we can't do it in this community, I'm not sure where we would be safe to do that. So in all seriousness, Jay, I will think about ways that we can continue the conversation. And yeah, the thing with Oklahoma, we used to have this great thing called the First Amendment, and now I'm not sure what the Supreme Court would think about that. So I don't know where we're going to go with that. But Jennifer, maybe you'll lead a discussion on that one. Yeah. The URJ isn't going to, the RAC isn't going to sue the state of Oklahoma? Okay, God willing. Especially a lot of publishers who might be upset that they don't fall into the criteria of getting that. So this is all great conversation for us to have during the ONEG. And I want us to continue that during the ONEG, but there are people at home who are waiting to say Kaddish. So it's my pleasure to invite up the president of our congregation, Jay Chenier, for some Shabbat greetings and announcements.
So, Shana Tova, Shabbat Shalom. Just a quick one before we do the announcements. You have some family here, and welcome to our family. If you could introduce them, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
We get to do like the bar mitzvah kids.
Okay, it's not going to take as long.
Have them stand.
Go have them stand.
Dad and Suzanne, would you please stand up? They're visiting from Chicago, and my dad was able to be here for Rosh Hashanah services, and they're both here to see our new life here in Sacramento, and so I'm so glad that you both could be here tonight and get to meet some of this amazing community.
And I don't know if everyone knows has been introduced to Chime, so it's a good time to do that as well. Please.
Chime, will you stand up as well? So if you haven't had a chance to meet Chime, she comes along with me, and she also has been doing amazing work behind the scenes on high holidays. So she's been in and out of these buildings a lot these past couple weeks. Yeah.
We're lucky to have a great package deal. We appreciate it. And Chime, thank you for helping us out. We talked about transitions the other night, but our interim executive director, Pam Herman, who's doing a fabulous job, celebrates with, where's she? At Orishon. So Chime has been able to step in and help us through the holidays, which has been really wonderful. So a few announcements. Tomorrow morning, 9:30, weekly Torah study in person and in Zoom. 10:30, Blair and Judy are leading services, and that's in person. And then 10:30 also mini minion with Lauren Silva here. Sunday, October 6th, there's a community memorial service which happens every year. This is at Home of Peace, 6200 Stockton Boulevard, and that is at 11 a.m. On Monday, there is a candlelight vigil, and that will be on the west steps of the Capitol. And I'm guessing that our rabbi knows a little bit more about it than I do.
6 p.m.
6 p.m. on the west steps of the Capitol, and we'll be there as well. Yeah. And I think that it's actually being put together by the rabbis throughout the community. That's what the Federation. Okay. They don't tell me anything, so I can't do much about it. There's something happening next weekend. That would be Kol Nidre, 7:30 p.m. services, and then a full lineup the next day. With that, we always want to introduce our board members and past presidents. If you all could stand, and committee chairs. Just use an outside voice. I think we can do that. Or do we need it for? Yeah. Yeah. I get it.
People online can't hear.
I got it. Okay.
I am Judy Hyman. I'm the board secretary and chair of the Racial Justice Committee.
I'm Steve Orkan. I'm a past president.
Davida Levin Robinson, VP and membership.
Bina Lefkowitz, past president.
Jennifer Kaufman, past president and co-chair of religious practices.
Joe Kassler, librarian.
Nita Davidson, I'm the Shamus coordinator, and this time of year I'm the BEMA manager. How's that? Not the stage manager, BEMA manager.
Laurel Tochterman, caring community.
Bruce Tochterman, past president.
And they are all wonderful people to ask questions about the temple and how to get involved.
Right. Thank you very much. And Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova.
You hanging out here? Because I need her. We continue now with our concluding prayers, beginning with the Aleinu, which can be found in the middle of page 586. Please rise.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה לעוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שהוא נוטה שמיים ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים הוא אלוהינו אין עוד אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו ככתוב בתורתו וידעת היום והשבות אל לבבך כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. Our thoughts now turn to loved ones who passed away recently or in years past. And it is with sadness that we announce the recent passing of Aryeh Karspum, the beloved uncle of Dorit Hertz. Also with sadness, we recall the recent passing of Frank Folger, beloved husband of Rhonda Folger, beloved father of Morgan Folger. Also with great sadness, we recall the recent passing of Betsy Elizabeth Burns, the beloved mother of Brandy Burns and Brett Burns. Zichronam Livracha, may their memories forever be a blessing. We also recall loved ones who have passed away at this time in years past. We remember Alita Anderson, Robert Aaron, Lenore Berg, Melvin Bloom, Zelda Serlin, Alvin L. Cohen, William Cohen, Sharon Crandall, Marilyn Favre, Wendy Feldman, Esther Fertig, Roswell Fine, Clara Hurwitz-Fram, Murray Goldstein, Madeline Rosenthal Goodwin, Camilla Greenlaw White, Gail Hart, Lindsay Haynes, Saul Hyman, James Hippler, Noel Kubel, Roberta Len, Annette Levy, Meyer I. Littman, Anna Livingston, Jerry Meltzer, Oscar Herman Millman, Roy Moon, Robert Morris, Kaufman Nesman, Ida Newman, Morris Opper, Beatrice Outwater, Joseph Perlberg, Leah Rice, Peggy Rosen, Dorothea Schoenfeld, Stephen Schwartz, Jeanette Seifris, Zelda Siegel, Howard Felix Siegel, Sylvia Silver Martin, Arlene Swartz, Joseph Swedlow, Nathan Tall, Max Welder, and Gary Ziegenfuss. If there are any names that anyone would like to add to the Kaddish list tonight, please feel free to call those names aloud as my gaze meets yours. I'd like to invite everyone who is saying Kaddish for a loved one today to please rise. And if the congregation can please join me in these words of comfort. Hamakom yinachem etchem b'tok sha'ar avlei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. We rise to offer comfort to those who grieve as we continue together on page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah. Ve'alma divra hirte v'yamlich malchute, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chaye dekol beit Yisrael, v'agala u'izman kariv imru amen. Yehe shmei rabba mevarach le'olam omei almaya, yitbarach v'yishabach v'yitba'ar v'yitraman v'yitnaseh, v'yitzadar v'yitalel v'yitalal shemei dekusha b'rechu, le'elam in kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbachata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'ramav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. And let us say, please be seated.
Not on a page? It's probably on a page.
Closing song may or may not be on a page in the prayer book, but the words are easy to learn, and if you know it, please sing along. If you don't know it, hum along.
648.
I knew it was in there. We conclude with the Kiddush and the Motzi. Oops, I'll go get it. And then afterwards, everyone is invited to please join us in the courtyard for the oneg that awaits us.
Thanks, Rabbi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu ושבת קודשו באהבה וברצון הנחילנו, זיכרון למעשה וראשית, כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי בנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. לחיים.
I miss the grape juice.
So let's get grape juice back. Ooh. Yeah, it's looking a little sad.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's old.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Shabbat shalom.
Please join us in the courtyard. Yeah, that was a little too...